Ryan had his life figured out. At least that's what everyone told him. At 34, he was living the kind of life most people only dream about. He worked as a senior architect at one of the biggest firms in the city, designing buildings that would stand for generations. His apartment overlooked the entire downtown area, with floor-to-ceiling windows that caught the sunrise every morning. And he was engaged to be married in the spring to a woman he'd been dating for 3 years. Every single day looked pretty much the same for him, and he liked it that way. He'd wake up at 6 in the morning, go for a run through the park near his building, stop at the same coffee shop where the owner knew his order by heart, and get to his office by 8 o'clock sharp. His coworkers would joke that you could set your watch by Ryan's schedule. He was the guy who had everything under control, the one who never seemed stressed or overwhelmed no matter how crazy things got at work. People respected that about him. When a client was upset about delays or budget issues, Ryan was the one who could calm them down with his steady voice and logical solutions. When the team was panicking about a tight deadline, he'd walk in with a clear plan that made everything seem manageable again. His boss once told him that he was the most reliable person in the entire company, someone who could handle anything without breaking a sweat. But Ryan wasn't always like this. Growing up, his house had been chaotic. His parents argued constantly about money. His younger sister had health problems that kept everyone on edge, and nothing ever felt stable or predictable. As a kid, he'd learned to hate that feeling of things being out of control. So when he got older, he made himself a promise. His life would be different. He would plan everything, control everything, and never let chaos take over. And it worked. For years, it worked perfectly. On this particular Tuesday morning in October, everything was going according to plan. The weather was cool and clear, perfect for his morning run.
He kissed his fiancée goodbye at the door and promised they'd look at wedding venues that evening.
She'd been excited about a place she found online, some restored barn upstate that looked straight out of a magazine. He wasn't crazy about the idea of getting married in a barn, but he figured he could compromise on that. After all, the marriage was what mattered, not where it happened. He drove to work listening to his favorite podcast about architecture and design. They were discussing a new project in Singapore that used sustainable materials in really innovative ways. Ryan made a mental note to research it more later. His own project, a community center designed to be eco-friendly and accessible to everyone in the neighborhood, had just won an award the month before. The trophy sat on his desk at work, and every time he looked at it, he felt proud of what he'd accomplished. The office parking garage was packed as usual, so he had to circle up to the 4th level before finding a spot. He grabbed his laptop bag and coffee, locked his car, and headed toward the elevators. A few other people from his building were waiting there too. He recognized some faces but didn't know most of their names. Everyone was just trying to get to work, checking their phones, looking half asleep. The elevator arrived with a soft ding, and the doors slid open. Ryan stepped inside and moved toward the back corner, his usual spot. He liked having the wall behind him where he could see everyone else. 6 other people piled in after him. Someone pressed the button for the 12th floor, another for the 15th. Ryan pressed 17 where his office was located. The doors closed and the elevator started its smooth climb upward. Ryan pulled out his phone to check his calendar. He had a team meeting at 10 to discuss the community center project, then lunch with a potential new client who wanted to build a series of mixed-use developments across the city. It could be a huge account if they landed it. The afternoon was blocked off for him to work on blueprints without interruptions. It looked like a good day, a productive day. He was mentally reviewing his presentation for the 10 o'clock meeting when the elevator suddenly jolted. Not a gentle bounce, but a hard, stomach-dropping jerk that made everyone grab for the handrails. The car came to a complete stop. Ryan looked up at the floor display. They were stuck somewhere between 14 and 15. The lights flickered once. Then again. Then they steadied, but the elevator didn't move. A recorded voice came through the speaker, calm and professional. "We are experiencing a temporary delay. Building maintenance has been notified and is working to resolve the issue. Please remain calm." Ryan glanced around at the other passengers. A woman in a blue suit sighed heavily and checked her watch. A young guy in a hoodie muttered something under his breath. An older man with a briefcase just shrugged. Nobody seemed particularly worried. These things happened in big office buildings. They'd be moving again in a few minutes. Ryan pulled out his phone to text his assistant that he might be a few minutes late. No signal, of course. Elevators were basically metal boxes. He put the phone back in his pocket and loosened his tie slightly. The air felt a little warm, but that was normal when 7 people were packed into a small space. Guess we're all going to be fashionably late this morning, someone joked from the front of the elevator. A couple people chuckled. The tension eased a bit. Ryan smiled politely but didn't say anything. He just wanted to get moving again so he could start his day. He looked up at the ceiling, then at the doors, willing them to open. That's when he noticed something strange. The elevator car seemed smaller than it had a minute ago. Or maybe he'd never really paid attention to how small it actually was, how tight the space felt with all these people in it. He took a breath and felt his chest tighten slightly. That was odd. He took another breath. It felt shallow, like he couldn't quite fill his lungs all the way. His heart beat a little faster. Just a little, but enough that he noticed it. It's fine, he told himself. They'll fix it in a minute. Everything's fine, but his body didn't seem to agree. His heart kept beating faster. And faster, and the walls really did seem closer now, pressing in from all sides. The air wasn't just warm anymore. It was thick, heavy, hard to breathe. Ryan's carefully controlled world was about to come crashing down, and he had no idea what was happening to him. Ryan's heart was pounding now. Really pounding. Not like when he went running or climbed stairs. This was different. This felt wrong. He could hear it thudding in his ears, feel it slamming against his ribcage like it was trying to break out. Each beat came faster than the last, and he couldn't seem to slow it down no matter how hard he tried. He pressed his hand against his chest, feeling the wild rhythm under his palm. Something was seriously wrong. Maybe he was having a heart attack. He was only 34, but people had heart attacks at 34, right? His uncle died of a heart attack at 42. It happened. It definitely happened. The woman in the blue suit was saying something about calling building security, but her voice sounded far away, like she was speaking from the end of a tunnel. Ryan tried to focus on her words, but his own heartbeat was so loud it drowned everything else out. Boom, 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 relentless, terrifying. He needed air. He needed to breathe. But when he tried to take a deep breath, his lungs wouldn't cooperate. It was like breathing through a straw, getting just tiny sips of oxygen that weren't nearly enough. He tried again, harder this time, pulling air in desperately. His chest felt tight, compressed like someone had wrapped steel bands around his ribs and was pulling them tighter and tighter. "You okay, man?" Ryan looked up and saw the guy in the hoodie staring at him with concern. Everyone was looking at him now. All 6 faces turned in his direction, watching him. That made it worse somehow. Much worse. He was trapped in this tiny box with all these people staring at him. And he couldn't breathe, and his heart was going to explode. And there was nowhere to go. "I'm fine," he managed to say. But his voice came out strange and strained. He wasn't fine. He was the opposite of fine. He was dying. Right here in this elevator, surrounded by strangers, he was dying. Sweat broke out across his forehead and started running down his temples. His shirt was sticking to his back, soaked through. His hands were shaking so badly he had to grip the handrail just to keep them steady. But even the metal bar seemed to vibrate under his trembling fingers. The walls were definitely moving now. There was no question about it. They were pressing inward, inch by inch, making the space smaller and smaller. Soon there wouldn't be any room left at all. They'd all be crushed. He looked at the ceiling and it seemed lower too, dropping down toward them. The elevator car was shrinking, turning into a coffin, and they were all going to suffocate before help arrived. "I need to get out," Ryan heard himself say. His voice sounded panicked and desperate, nothing like his usual calm tone. "I need to get out right now." "They're working on it," the older man with the briefcase said gently. "Should be just a few more minutes. A few more minutes." Ryan couldn't last a few more minutes. He couldn't last another 30 seconds. His heart was beating so fast now it felt like one continuous vibration instead of individual beats. His vision started to blur around the edges, darkening like someone was slowly turning down the lights. Was he going to pass out? If he passed out, would he wake up again? His legs felt weak, unreliable. The strength just drained out of them like water running down a drain. He tried to stay standing, tried to hold on to that last shred of control, but his body had other ideas. His knees buckled, and he slid down the elevator wall until he was sitting on the floor, gasping like a fish pulled out of water. Hey, someone call for help." The woman in the blue suit knelt down next to him, her face close to his. "Sir, are you having a heart attack? Does your chest hurt?" Did his chest hurt? Everything hurt. His chest, his head, his arms, his stomach. Every part of his body was screaming that something terrible was happening. He nodded, unable to form words anymore. The air wouldn't come. No matter how hard he tried to breathe, he couldn't get enough oxygen. His lungs were useless. His heart was failing. This was it. This was how he was going to die. Someone was hitting the emergency button repeatedly, the alarm ringing through the small space. People were shouting. The guy in the hoodie was on his phone, somehow getting a signal now, talking to someone about a medical emergency. Everything was chaos and noise, and Ryan was at the center of it all, drowning in terror. He grabbed at his collar, trying to loosen his tie, but his fingers wouldn't work properly. They felt numb and clumsy, like they belonged to someone else. The woman helped him, pulling his tie loose and unbuttoning the top button of his shirt. It didn't help. Nothing helped. He still couldn't breathe. The air still wouldn't come. Time stopped making sense. Seconds felt like hours. Hours felt like seconds. He had no idea how long he'd been sitting there on the elevator floor, struggling for air, certain he was dying. It could have been 5 minutes. It could have been 50. All he knew was the terror, pure and overwhelming, washing over him in waves that never stopped coming. And then, just as suddenly as it had stopped, the elevator lurched back into motion. The mechanical hum filled the car as they started moving upward. 14. 15. The doors opened on the 15th floor, and 2 paramedics rushed in with a gurney and equipment. Someone must have called them. Ryan barely registered their arrival. He was still gasping, still shaking, still convinced his heart was about to give out. "Sir, we're going to help you. Can you tell me your name?" One of the paramedics knelt beside him, professional and calm. "Ryan," he managed to whisper. "I think I'm having a heart attack." "Okay, Ryan, we're going to check you out. Try to take slow breaths if you can. In through your nose, out through your mouth." They helped him onto the gurney, strapped him in, and wheeled him out of the elevator. As they moved him through the office building lobby, Ryan saw dozens of faces staring at him. His co-workers, people he knew, people he'd led meetings with, shared coffee with, joked with in the break room. They were all watching him being wheeled, out on a stretcher, sweating and shaking and completely falling apart. The man who never lost his cool, the guy who had everything under control. That's what they used to think about him. But now they'd seen the truth. They'd seen him break down completely. They'd seen him weak and terrified and helpless. The paramedics loaded him into the ambulance, and as the doors closed, Ryan closed his eyes. The fluorescent lights were too bright, the sounds too loud, his heartbeat still too fast. He just wanted it all to stop. He wanted to rewind time to an hour ago when everything was normal, and his biggest worry was whether he'd get to the meeting on time. But you can't rewind time. You can only move forward. And as the ambulance pulled away from the building with sirens wailing, Ryan had no idea that those 8 minutes in the elevator had just divided his entire life into 2 parts. The before and the after, and nothing would ever be the same again. The hospital waiting room smelled like disinfectant and old coffee. Ryan sat in a plastic chair with electrodes stuck to his chest, wires running to a monitor that beeped steadily beside him. For the past 4 hours, doctors and nurses had been running tests, blood work, EKG, chest x-rays. They'd checked his heart from every possible angle, listened to his lungs, asked him 100 questions about his medical history, and everything came back normal. "Your heart is perfectly healthy," the doctor told him, pulling up a chair to sit at eye level. She was younger than Ryan expected, maybe in her early 30s, with tired eyes that suggested she'd been on shift for too long. "All your tests look good. Blood pressure is a bit elevated, but that's expected given what you went through." Ryan stared at her. "But my heart was beating so fast I couldn't breathe. I thought I was dying." "I know it felt that way," she said gently. "What you experienced was a panic attack, a severe one, but a panic attack nonetheless." Those words hit him like a slap. A panic attack. That's what happened to nervous people, anxious people, people who couldn't handle stress, not to him, not to someone who'd built his entire life around staying calm and in control. "That's not possible," Ryan said, shaking his head. "I don't get panic attacks. I don't even get stressed." The doctor gave him a small, understanding smile. "Panic attacks can happen to anyone, even people who've never experienced anxiety before. Sometimes they come out of nowhere. I'm going to give you a referral to a psychiatrist who can help you work through this." She handed him a piece of paper with a name and phone number printed on it. Ryan took it automatically, but he had no intention of calling. This was just a one-time thing, a fluke. Maybe he'd been working too hard lately, not sleeping enough. Once he got some rest, everything would go back to normal. He crumpled the paper and tossed it in the trash can on his way out to his car. But things didn't go back to normal. 3 days later, Ryan was standing in line at the grocery store when it happened again. The line was long, moving slowly, and he was boxed in by shopping carts on both sides. That familiar tightness started in his chest. His heart began to speed up. Before he could even think about what was happening, the full wave of panic crashed over him. He abandoned his cart right there in the middle of the store and ran outside, leaving confused shoppers staring after him. A week after that, he was at dinner with his fiancée and some friends at a nice restaurant downtown. They were celebrating a friend's promotion, laughing and sharing appetizers when Ryan felt the panic rising again. The restaurant was crowded and loud. Too many people, too much noise. No easy way to get out if he needed to leave. His heart started racing. His hands started shaking. He made some excuse about not feeling well and left before the main course arrived. His fiancée, Katie, followed him outside. "What's going on with you?" she asked, her voice a mix of concern and frustration. "This is the third time this week you've just left in the middle of something." "I don't know," Ryan admitted, and that scared him more than anything. He really didn't know. He didn't understand why his own body was betraying him like this. The attacks kept coming. Sometimes there was a trigger he could identify, like being in a crowded place or feeling trapped. But other times, they came out of nowhere. He'd be watching TV on the couch completely relaxed, and suddenly his heart would start racing and the panic would take over. It made no sense. There was no pattern, no way to predict when it would happen next. And that uncertainty was killing him. Ryan started avoiding things. First, it was elevators. He took the stairs everywhere, even up to his office on the 17th floor. Then he started avoiding crowded places. No more grocery stores during peak hours. No more restaurants. No more sitting in the middle of a row at the movie theater where he'd have to climb over people to get out. His world was getting smaller, day by day, and he could feel it happening but didn't know how to stop it. Katie tried to be understanding at first. She read articles online about panic attacks and tried to talk to him about what she learned. But Ryan didn't want to talk about it. Talking about it made it real, made it something he had to acknowledge and deal with. He just wanted to push through it on his own, the way he'd pushed through every other challenge in his life. "You need to see someone," Katie told him one night after he'd canceled plans to go to her sister's birthday party. "This isn't something you can just ignore until it goes away." "I'm fine," Ryan insisted, even though they both knew it was a lie. "You're not fine. You haven't been fine for weeks. You barely leave the apartment anymore. You're not sleeping. You're not eating properly. Ryan, this isn't you." "I said I'm fine." His voice came out sharper than he intended, and he saw her flinch. He never yelled at Katie. He never lost his temper, but lately he was so on edge that everything felt like too much. The breaking point came with their engagement party. Katie had been planning it for months, excited to celebrate with all their friends and family. She'd booked a venue, ordered catering, sent out invitations. 50 people were coming to toast their upcoming marriage. Ryan couldn't do it. The morning of the party, he woke up with his heart already racing. The thought of being in a room with 50 people, all looking at him, expecting him to be happy and social and normal, was more than he could handle. What if he had a panic attack in front of everyone? What if he had to run out in the middle of his own engagement party? The humiliation would be unbearable. "I can't go," he told Katie. She was in the bathroom doing her makeup, wearing the new dress she'd bought specifically for today. She stopped mid-motion and looked at him in the mirror. What do you mean you can't go? I just can't, I'm sorry. I know you planned everything, but I can't be around that many people right now. Ryan, it's our engagement party. Our friends and family are expecting us. My parents are expecting us. You have to go. I can't. The panic was already starting just thinking about it. His chest was tightening. I'm sorry, Katie. I know this isn't fair to you, but I physically cannot walk into that room today. Katie set down her makeup brush slowly. Her hands were shaking. You know what? I can't do this anymore. Do what? Watch you disappear. Because that's what's happening. The man I fell in love with, the man I agreed to marry, he's gone. And I don't know who you are anymore. She walked out of the bathroom, grabbed her purse, and headed for the door. Where are you going? Ryan asked, panic of a different kind rising in his chest. To our engagement party. Someone should show up. She paused at the door, her hand on the knob. I'll come back tomorrow for my things. The door closed behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded louder than any slam. Ryan stood there in the empty apartment, surrounded by the silence, and finally understood how much he'd lost. His job was barely hanging on. His relationship was over. His friends had stopped calling after he'd canceled on them so many times. In just a few weeks, his entire carefully constructed life had crumbled around him, and he had no idea how to put it back together. Ryan woke up on a cold January morning and realized he hadn't left his apartment in 11 days. The takeout containers were piling up on his kitchen counter. His laundry basket was overflowing. The curtains had been closed for so long he'd forgotten what the view from his windows looked like. He shuffled to the bathroom and caught sight of himself in the mirror. He barely recognized the person staring back at him. His beard had grown wild and uneven. Dark circles hung under his eyes from too many nights spent awake at 3 a.m, Googling symptoms and reading medical forums. He'd lost weight. His face looked hollow, older somehow, like he'd aged 10 years in 3 months. This wasn't him. This couldn't be him. But it was. That moment of looking in the mirror and seeing a stranger was what finally broke through his denial. He couldn't keep living like this. He couldn't keep pretending he could handle this on his own. If he didn't do something now, really do something, he was going to lose everything that mattered. Maybe he already had. He went back to his bedroom and started digging through old papers until he found the hospital discharge documents from that day in October. The psychiatrist's name and number were still there, printed at the bottom of the page. His hand shook as he picked up his phone. He'd never felt more like a failure in his entire life, but he dialed the number anyway. The receptionist answered on the second ring. Dr. Chen's office. Ryan's throat felt tight. Hi, I need to make an appointment. I was referred by the hospital a few months ago, and I'm finally ready to come in. Getting to that first appointment was harder than he expected. The office was 20 minutes away, which meant leaving his apartment, getting in his car, driving through traffic, and walking into a building full of people. Every step of the journey felt like climbing a mountain. But he did it. Somehow he did it. Dr. Chen was a woman in her 50s with gray-streaked hair pulled back in a loose bun and glasses that sat on the end of her nose. She didn't look intimidating, which helped. She gestured to a comfortable chair across from her desk and asked Ryan to tell her what brought him in. He told her everything. The elevator. The panic attacks. The way his life had fallen apart. Katie leaving. Taking a leave of absence from work because he couldn't function anymore. The loneliness, the fear. By the time he finished talking, his voice was rough and his eyes were burning with tears he refused to let fall. Dr. Chen listened to all of it without interrupting. When he was done, she leaned back in her chair and nodded slowly. What you're describing is panic disorder. It's a real medical condition, Ryan. It's not weakness. It's not a character flaw. It's not something you can just think your way out of. And most importantly, it's treatable. Those words hit him harder than he expected. Treatable. That meant there was hope. That meant this didn't have to be forever. Your brain's alarm system is malfunctioning, Dr. Chen explained. It's triggering a fear response when there's no actual danger. We can work on resetting that system, but it takes time and effort. I'm going to prescribe medication to help stabilize your nervous system. And I'm referring you to a therapist who specializes in cognitive behavioral therapy. The medication will help take the edge off, but the real work happens in therapy. Ryan started the medication that same day. Dr. Chen warned him it would take a few weeks to feel the full effects, and she was right. The first week, nothing changed. The second week, he felt slightly less on edge, but the panic attacks still came. By the third week, though, something shifted. The attacks were still there, but they weren't quite as intense. His baseline anxiety dropped from a constant 7 out of 10 to maybe a 5. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. The therapist, a guy named Michael who wore sneakers to their sessions and kept a stress ball on his desk, introduced Ryan to exposure therapy. The concept was simple but terrifying. Face your fears gradually in controlled ways until they lose their power over you. We're going to start small, Michael said during their second session. What's something that makes you anxious but isn't completely overwhelming? Ryan thought about it. The lobby of my building. I can get to the front door, but going inside where there are other people, where I might have to make small talk with neighbors, that's hard. Perfect. This week, I want you to go to your building lobby and stand there for 2 minutes. That's it. Just 2 minutes. You don't have to talk to anyone. You can leave after 2 minutes. Can you do that? It sounded easy. It wasn't. The first time Ryan tried it, he made it 30 seconds before the panic started rising and he had to leave. But he went back the next day and made it 45 seconds. The day after that, a full minute. By the end of the week, he hit the 2-minute goal. Good, Michael said when Ryan told him. Now we're going to add something. This week, 2 minutes in the lobby, and you're going to smile and say hello to one person. Just one. Step by step, week by week, Ryan started rebuilding his tolerance. 2 minutes in the lobby became 5, then 10. Saying hello to one person became having a brief conversation. After that came riding the elevator up 1 floor. Then 2 floors. Then 5. There were setbacks. Plenty of them. Days when he felt like he was back at square one, when the panic was just as bad as it had been in the beginning. Those days he wanted to quit. Wanted to retreat back into his apartment and give up on everything. But Michael had prepared him for this. Recovery isn't a straight line, Michael reminded him during a particularly rough session. You're going to have bad days. That doesn't mean the work isn't working. It just means healing takes time. Ryan joined a support group that met every Thursday evening at a community center near his apartment. Walking into that first meeting was almost as hard as going to see Dr. Chen had been. But once he was inside, sitting in a circle with 8 other people who understood exactly what he was going through, something loosened in his chest. A woman named Jennifer talked about having panic attacks while driving, and how she'd been too scared to get behind the wheel for 6 months. A college student named Tyler described having an attack during a final exam, and failing the class because he had to run out of the room. An older man named Robert shared how panic disorder had cost him his marriage of 20 years. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, Ryan didn't feel alone. I thought I was the only one, he admitted when it was his turn to share. I thought there was something uniquely broken about me. But hearing all of your stories, knowing other people are fighting this same battle, it helps. It really helps. 6 months after that terrible day in the elevator, Ryan got a call from his old boss. The firm wanted him back, but not in his previous role. They were starting a new initiative focused on wellness and accessibility in building design, and they thought Ryan would be perfect for it. We've been thinking about mental health and how our spaces affect people, his boss explained over the phone. Quiet rooms for people who get overwhelmed, better natural lighting, multiple exits so people don't feel trapped. We want buildings that work for everyone, including people dealing with anxiety. You'd be leading the project. Ryan sat there with the phone pressed to his ear, not sure what to say. A few months ago, he would have said no immediately. The thought of going back to work, being around people, having responsibilities again would have been too much. But now, after all the therapy and medication and small victories, something felt different. Can I start part-time? He asked. Maybe work from home a few days a week at first? We can make that work. Ryan took a deep breath. His heart rate picked up slightly, but it wasn't panic. It was something else, something that felt almost like hope. Okay, he said. I'm in. 18 months after the elevator incident, Ryan stood in front of a conference room on the 23rd floor of a building he'd helped design. His hand rested on the door handle and he could feel his heart beating faster than normal. Not racing, not pounding, just faster. The old familiar whisper of anxiety was there at the edges of his mind, but it didn't control him anymore. He took a slow breath, the way Michael had taught him. In through the nose for 4 counts. Hold for 4. Out through the mouth for 6. The breath technique didn't make the anxiety disappear, but it kept it manageable, kept it from growing into something bigger. Then he opened the door and walked inside. 20 people sat around the conference table, waiting for his presentation on the new wellness initiative. Ryan set up his laptop, pulled up his slides, and began talking about something he never imagined would become his life's work. Designing spaces that considered mental health alongside everything else. Traditional architecture focuses on function and aesthetics, he told the room. But we're proposing something different. Buildings that actually support the people inside them. Quiet rooms where someone can step away when they're feeling overwhelmed. Natural lighting that reduces stress. Open layouts with multiple exits so no one feels trapped. These aren't luxury features. They're necessities. He clicked to the next slide showing designs for a new office complex. We've incorporated biophilic elements bringing nature indoors. Studies show that even small amounts of greenery can reduce anxiety levels significantly. We've also created transitional spaces, areas where people can decompress before entering high-stimulus environments. As he spoke, Ryan realized something. He wasn't just talking about good design principles. He was talking about what he'd needed during his darkest days. What he still needed sometimes. He was building the world he wished had existed when everything fell apart. The presentation went well. Better than well, actually. The clients asked thoughtful questions and seemed genuinely excited about the concept. When the meeting ended and everyone filed out, Ryan packed up his laptop with hands that were only slightly shaky. He'd done it. He'd made it through without running out, without falling apart. In the elevator ride down, alone this time, he felt his pulse quicken. The old fear tried to grab hold. What if it gets stuck? What if it happens again? But Ryan had tools now. He had strategies. He focused on his breathing, reminded himself that he was safe, and by the time the doors opened on the ground floor, the moment had passed. The panic attacks never completely disappeared. That was something Ryan had to accept. Even now, years later, they still showed up occasionally. Sometimes there was a clear trigger, like being in a crowded subway car during rush hour. Other times they came out of nowhere, ambushing him on a random Tuesday afternoon while he was doing something completely ordinary. But he knew how to handle them now. He kept medication in his pocket, more as a security blanket than anything else. Most of the time, he didn't need it. The breathing exercises worked. The grounding techniques worked. Reminding himself that he'd survived every panic attack before and would survive this one too, that worked. He still went to therapy, though less frequently now. Once a month instead of once a week. Michael had become more than just his therapist over the years. He was someone who understood the journey, who celebrated the victories and helped navigate the setbacks. You know what I'm proud of? Michael said during one of their recent sessions. Not that you don't have panic attacks anymore, because that was never the goal. I'm proud that you have them and keep living your life anyway. That's the real victory. Ryan had never reconciled with Katie. That chapter of his life was closed and he'd made peace with it. He'd sent her a letter about a year after she left, not asking her to come back but thanking her for the time they'd shared and wishing her well. She'd sent back a brief but kind response. She was engaged to someone else now, and Ryan was genuinely happy for her. She deserved someone who could show up for her in ways he couldn't back then. His own romantic life had started slowly, a few awkward dates that went nowhere. Then he'd met someone at his Thursday support group. Her name was Lisa, and she taught elementary school. She'd developed severe anxiety after being in a car accident 2 years earlier. Their first real conversation happened after a group session, both of them standing in the parking lot talking about how hard it was to explain panic disorder to people who'd never experienced it. They think you're just being dramatic, Lisa said, shaking her head, or that you should just calm down like it's that simple. Or they treat you like you're broken, Ryan added, like you're fragile and might shatter at any moment. They started getting coffee after group meetings. Then coffee turned into dinner. Then dinner turned into something more. What Ryan appreciated most about Lisa was that she understood. When he had to leave a movie theater because he was feeling trapped, she didn't take it personally. When he needed to take the stairs instead of the elevator, she climbed with him without asking questions. And when she had her own bad days, he returned that same understanding. They weren't perfect together. Both of them had issues they were working through, triggers they were learning to manage. But they were honest with each other in a way Ryan had never been with Katie. There was no pretending, to be fine when he wasn't. No, Hiding his struggles to maintain some image of having it all together, Ryan still volunteered with a mental health advocacy organization, speaking at events about his experience. The first time he shared his story publicly, standing on a small stage in front of 100 people, he'd been terrified. But afterward, 3 people came up to him with tears in their eyes, thanking him for putting words to what they'd been going through. "I thought I was the only one," a young woman told him. "I thought I was losing my mind. But hearing you describe it, knowing someone else has been through this and came out the other side, it gives me hope." That's when Ryan understood why sharing his story mattered, not for himself, but for the people still trapped in that dark place he'd been in. The people sitting alone in their apartments, convinced they were uniquely broken, too ashamed to ask for help. On a crisp autumn morning, 5 years after that terrible Tuesday in October, Ryan found himself back in the same office building where it all started. He was meeting with his old firm about a potential collaboration. As he walked through the lobby, he passed the bank of elevators where his life had changed forever. He paused for a moment, looking at them. A small group of people waited for the next car to arrive. They looked impatient, checking their watches, scrolling through their phones. Just another ordinary morning for them. They had no idea that someone standing nearby had once fallen apart in one of those elevators, had once thought his life was over. The elevator dinged and the doors opened. Ryan stepped inside with the others. His heart rate elevated slightly as the doors closed. A whisper of the old fear stirred in his chest. But he breathed through it, rode the wave, and let it pass. The elevator rose smoothly to the 17th floor. When the doors opened, Ryan stepped out into the hallway with steady legs and calm hands. He wasn't the same person who'd entered this building 5 years ago, confident and completely in control. That person had been living a carefully constructed illusion, believing he could plan away every problem and avoid every difficulty. The person he was now understood something deeper. Control was an illusion. Life was unpredictable and sometimes overwhelming. Bad things happened to good people for no reason at all, but humans were resilient in ways they never imagined until they had to be. They could break and heal and break again and still keep moving forward. Ryan had spent years ashamed of those 8 minutes in the elevator, seeing them as the moment he'd failed. But now he understood they were something else entirely. They were the moment his real life began. The moment he learned that being human meant being vulnerable, and being vulnerable wasn't the same as being weak. He walked down the hallway toward his meeting, carrying his laptop bag and his hard-won wisdom. The panic had changed his life forever, that much was true. But not by destroying him. By breaking him open and forcing him to rebuild himself into someone more honest, more compassionate, and more fully alive to both the pain and the beauty of being human. And that, Ryan had finally learned, was worth every difficult step of the journey.